When you want to define grief, there's all kinds of definitions out there, but grief is just pure sadness, pure loss, pure emotion that sometimes takes us to places we don't want to go, but I believe we need to go. I believe we need to go to the fear, the anger. I believe we have to go into all the sadness and the scared. I think we have to go to all those places because I think that if we don't, then we lose the wholeness of the relationship. I wish for folks to not be fearful of the hard stuff, because when we open ourselves up and find the places that we need to find for support, there's such magic in the growth. There's so much magic. If we just go through our daily life and push it away or normalize things that don't need to be normalized, it's not okay to disregard our emotions, then we're missing what I think it is to be fully human.
Welcome to the Relationship Diversity Podcast, where we celebrate, question, and explore all aspects of relationship structure diversity, from soloamory to monogamy to polyamory and everything in between, because every relationship is as unique as you are. We'll bust through societal programming to break open and dissect everything we thought we knew about relationships, to ask the challenging but transformational questions: who am I, and what do I really want in my relationships? I'm your guide, Carrie Jaroslaw, best-selling author, speaker, intuitive, and coach. Join me as we reimagine all that our most intimate relationships can become. Today's episode is part of our conversation series. I'm just one voice in this relationship diversity movement, and it's important to bring more unique perspectives into the conversation. Today, I have an amazing conversation with my beautiful friend, Jennifer Bracey, a spiritual care and bereavement facilitator for hospice and a death doula. We talk all about grief, what it is, how it can look and feel, and the importance of it for healthy endings, which can then create space for healthy new beginnings. But first, a little about her. Jennifer began her journey of counseling over 30 years ago, providing pastoral care to her community. She has a bachelor's degree in education from Mars Hill University and earned a master's degree in pastoral counseling and spirituality from Baptist Theological Seminary at Richmond. After witnessing the impact somatic-based therapy had for her daughter, Jennifer began training to become a somatic experiencing practitioner in 2012. Her focus is on trauma recovery and resilience through body work. For the last 11 years, Jennifer has worked to improve her clients' struggles with sensory and emotional regulation, supporting family units, and providing specialized care plans for every person she works with. She's also certified in several different therapeutic modalities, including Transforming the Experienced Brain, TEB, as well as Safe and Sound Therapy Protocol. She's currently in spiritual care and bereavement for hospice and has been trained as a death doula, offering support to her community. Let's get into the conversation. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Relationship Diversity Podcast. I have got one of my closest friends here today, and I'm really excited to talk about this subject, which most people say, why would you be excited to talk about the subject we're going to talk about? But I've got my great friend, Jennifer Bracey, here, and this is a really important topic, which I'll get into in just a minute. So first, welcome my friend Jennifer to the podcast.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
I've always wanted to have you on here, and this was the perfect timing because I have been really called to talk about grief and grieving. And one of the reasons that this has been super high on my list of topics that I think is important to start talking about is because, I talk about relationships, and I keep hearing about a lot of people who are shifting their relationship dynamic or structure, meaning a lot of people are breaking up, a lot of marriages are ending, or even people are shifting from one structure to another structure. And then all the other things that are going on in life, all of the other endings. And what is so important, I think, in this idea of endings and then creating space for new beginnings is grieving. And I don't think we talk about grieving enough in our culture. And I think it's really important. It is very natural. And yet I don't think a lot of people even know what it is and how it shows up. And so in the effort and intention of wanting people to complete cycles so that new beginnings can open up, I thought that it would be really great to have you, my dear friend Jennifer, here to talk about grieving. So first, I would love everyone out there to understand who you are and why you are so qualified to talk about the subject of grief.
Well, I think we do grief a lot in a lot of different spaces where I work, but one of the spaces that I work in a lot was for hospice care. And with hospice, I am on their staff in the local hospice here as a chaplain and as a bereavement coordinator and support person. So I obviously work in a lot of situations that there's a lot of grief for a lot of different people in a lot of different ways. And I see that in all kinds of relationships and how everybody deals with that. And then the other place that I do my work is that I work as a death doula. So I've been working on living in and walking alongside folks with grief in a lot of different ways for a long time.
What is a death doula, Jennifer, for people who do not know?
So a death doula can do a lot of different things. A death doula can sit vigil at the bedside as a person is dying. I think that's what a lot of people think that a death doula does, help somebody pass over. But also death doulas work with the person well before there's any idea of death and dying to help them prepare for the legalistic things that need to be done, to have hard conversations with families, because some families look very different than what the normal family used to look like many, many years ago. And so how do we do this death journey together in a way that might bring in all kinds of different kinds of relationships with folks? And so we sit in those conversations and what that person wants. How do you want it to look? And so a death doula sits in those hard spaces to have those hard conversations, because in the real world, we don't want to lose relationships as we do this hard stuff. And that's another thing that the death doula does. A death doula can do things even as much as when somebody gets to where they can't do for themselves, then we might take them to appointments, or we might be the one that really is the primary person in contact because their children are out of town and can't get to their parents all the time. There's all kinds of different things that a death doula can do. We talk about burials and all the different ways and rites and rituals and what they can look like. It's not just what it used to be. There's a lot of different options, because if we go back years and years ago, our families did all this. We didn't bring in everybody else. And so we talk about how do we get back to what is important to the one person, that one client that I might have, what's important to them.
It's so interesting because one of the things that Jennifer did not say that she does is she is a somatic therapist. And I go to her for this, which leads me into my next thing, is because as you're talking about grief, I feel sensations in my chest. I feel nervousness. Why are we nervous? And I think a lot of people are very nervous to talk about this subject and to talk about death. Why is that, Jennifer? Help us understand that.
I see that emotion.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, if we think about how we used to do death 100 or so years ago, it was all about the family, the neighbors, the people that were in our community. We walked that journey with each other. We didn't have medical staff. We didn't have funeral services. We didn't have all of that. And so we lived it. We walked it, and we had to do it together. But now we have so many external folks that are good, that help us, the medical folks and all those kinds of things, but it takes us away from dealing with the walk and the journey. And so if we don't grow up in generations of talking about it, seeing it, and what I always say is, when we see this cycle of death and dying, and then we see the family continue and move forward, and then there's no more death and dying, there's a rhythm to what we know to be true about life in general. Everybody's going to die. but let's not, in our day, we just don't want to talk about it. And when I do my doula work and I talk to people about it, I say, your 18-year-old needs to know what to do, and they need to tell you what they want to do in case something happened to them. And most people will go, I'm not going to talk to my 18-year-old about that. Well, why not? Because you really should have been talking to your 3 and 4-year-old about that. We have lost the cycle of death and dying and repair and healing and continuing. We've lost that. And so because we lost that rhythm, it's fearful. It's more institutionalized.
The word grief is kind of elusive. What is grief?
Yeah. So grief is different for everybody, and grief shows up in different ways at different times. And when we talk about rhythms, grief is not linear. You're not going to go from the shock to the anger to the sadness and being able to find some hope. You don't go from one thing to the other. It doesn't happen like that. You may be in shock and then you're really okay for a while, and then pops up this anger, right? Where did this anger came from? Well, that's your grief. That's unresolved grief. That is grief that is showing up in a different way to let your body and let your emotions go through this and heal in a way that it needs to heal. Grief is held differently by different people. Like some of us walk through that grief and that death and dying, our relationships, death and dying of a relationship. Some of us do that so differently. And the reason we all do it differently is because we all have journeyed differently. We bring to this point in time something different, but we also, in relationship with another person, have a different relationship with that person that may be dying or that person that may be living. Our relationship with that person is different than the other person in the house. And so my sadness and my grief doesn't look like somebody else that has that, not even a sibling. My sibling grief is different than somebody else's sibling grief. My grief as a child at the loss of my father was much different than the grief of what my brothers looked like. Not that either one of us loved less. It's just that I do grief differently. And so when you want to define grief, there's all kinds of definitions out there, but grief is just pure sadness, pure loss, pure emotion that sometimes takes us to places we don't want to go, but I believe we need to go. I believe we need to go to the fear, the anger. I believe we have to go into all the sadness and the scared. I think we have to go to all those places.
And why do you think that?
Because I think that if we don't, then we lose the wholeness of the relationship. So when you talk about moving on, whatever you're moving on from after a loss, when you're dealing with grief, you will always have that memory. You will always have that relationship. But if you don't really dig into how do I feel because this really makes me sad, what is that sad? If you don't go to the sad or the fear of the loss, then you can't really totally move on and see what's next, because you're going to be so afraid if I go too close into something else. If I love somebody or in relationship too far in, I'll never love a sibling like that again, or I'll never care about a spouse or a partner like that again because I'm not doing this again. We're losing out on life.
Right. Or if we do, it might get taken away again. That was something when my stepbrother was killed. When I was 16, he was 17. And I don't think I ever really grieved it. As a 16-year-old, I just didn't know how to grieve it. And now in my 50s, see how much I carried that I did not grieve. I carry that into my life. And so I'm having to go into it and process it as a 55-year-old. So it does seem like it's so important. Like it has kept me from living fully certain parts of my life because I never did fully grieve that.
Right. And I will also say, and some people may not agree with this, but I will also say that if when you were that age, you were able to understand grief and those emotions and to be in them and have the support that you needed while you were in those things and somebody walking that journey with you, then while you may be much more mature the next time you have a loss at 30 or whatever, because you did that even as a 15-year-old, going into it the next time makes it easier. It's like you somatically and almost just intuitively know, I know how this feels. And it's a different relationship. Don't get me wrong. Every direct relationship loss is different, but it's not so scary because you walk that journey with someone or some people that were supportive and allowed you to walk that journey. And so now at your age, now we're processing it. Oh, that's what that is. Oh, and that's what I didn't do way back when. That's
Right.
why we talk to parents with children, whether it's divorce, separation, a new relationship, whatever it is, it's really important to walk through that journey with those children and let them experience all the things that they're losing, even though they may be gaining. It's really important.
Yeah. And that requires us and us, if we're dealing with it through ourselves or if we're watching someone that we love, to sit in discomfort, which
Absolutely.
we're not taught how to do, and that's even okay for our little nervous systems to sit in discomfort, and what that even is like. How do we do that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because if you don't feel comfortable, or now a lot of people think, let's just be real. There's some people that think if you're not happy, if you're not moving forward, if you're not getting on with whatever the program is, then you don't have enough faith, you don't have enough trust in yourself or whatever. So we get all kinds of negative messages if we even try to sit in the discomfort. And so lots of times we have to work to get there and then to figure out how to stay there because of the messaging that we've been given over all these years. So you got to have somebody to be there with you to be in the discomfort. You got to be able to say, I'm really not at a good place today. I'm feeling very angry or scared or whatever it is, and have that safe place for that to happen. Everybody needs their safe place to be in the discomfort.
And to learn the language to even say what you just said. We're not taught. We have to reteach ourselves how to understand that, oh, I'm not really angry at my spouse. I'm just grieving and it's coming out as anger.
Yes. Yes. And to be okay to be angry. See, a lot of us have been told that we're not supposed to be angry. A lot of us have been told that there's negative feelings. There's not any negative or positive feelings. Feelings are just feelings, and we get to have all of them.
And so how would be a healthy way to sit in our anger? How would you recommend people to process through that kind of anger and sadness?
I always go back to my somatic work. So that's where my suggestions and where my thoughts are. And that is that if you are at a place in loss and grief and you feel that anger, then I want you to drop into where it feels in your body. Because the one thing we don't want to do is to be so angry that we don't know where it is, because our feelings do show up in our bodies. Where is that sensation in your body? Where is that anger? Is it in your hands and you just want to punch someone, or is it really stuck in your chest? And for everybody, it's always different. And anger is not always in the same place for us individually. So you have to sit there with that. But before we can do that, Carrie, everyone has to feel safe enough to do that. And sometimes that takes some support to feel safe enough, because if we've never felt safe in our anger, then it's hard to go there. And so you need somebody else to help you with that. You still have your own quiet work to do. But when we do our own quiet work, we sometimes get it all figured out cognitively in our head, and we're not healing our bodies. And our emotions and our traumas and our sadness and grief are held in our bodies. And that doesn't always keep us healthy. And so how do you identify it? And then how do you release it? And that's a learned thing. That's not something we've ever been taught before, because we're just supposed to figure it out in our brain. Our cognitive knowing is supposed to control our behavior.
Yeah. And I have gone this journey. You've been a big part of helping me with this. And I find that it takes a lot of patience. I think the more grieving of someone passing, by the time my mother passed, I understood grief because I had been through grief. So I understood that it came up whenever it was going to. I couldn't push it down. I had to create space in my schedule to sit with it, to be with it, to not disassociate from it, but to actually lean into it. And one of the biggest self practices was patience, self patience, and self compassion, and being patient that it is a process and that it's going to take however long it is going to take. Can you speak to that?
What a novel idea, right?
What a novel idea to be patient with yourself and loving towards yourself.
Yeah, I lead a grief group and I just came from that grief group. And one of the things that I say to folks there is if you are grieving and it shows up as sadness today, at that moment, if you cannot be with that, then you need to go back to that, right? Mm-hmm. So we do need to sit in it and we do not need to push it away. And so if it is uncomfortable to be in the sadness, I think that first we have to acknowledge that to ourselves. I don't like this. This doesn't feel good. And lots of times we just want to run from it. And so that's when we can't be patient with ourselves. We look for someone else to help us to learn to be patient and loving and create that safe container. But it does take patience. We all have survived most of our lives using our cognitive brain. And until we can drop into our bodies and really know where to be loving and kind and patient in places where we don't want to be today, I don't have time to be patient. I don't have time to be in this sadness. I got 10 other things to do. Fair enough, but you still need to drop in and acknowledge it and know that you need to go back to it. Pushing it away will keep it stuck.
And then when you're going into something new, you're just bringing whatever is stuck into it. And more times it's just kicking the can down the road.
Yes, it's going to show up. If you cannot be patient with yourself and loving when you are sad, then it is going to show up in other places of loss and grief. Absolutely.
In all of your experience, what do you think the majority of people struggle with? Is there like one common theme that you see throughout all of the people that you've worked with of what people struggle with when it comes to grieving?
There's almost an avoidance of emotionally engaging in what this really is in reality, or the avoidance looks like, for example, you talk about relationships. And so if you see relationships changing, shifting, and we want to move to something new or different, I get that. But I also believe that it often is easier to avoid all of the stuff that's uncomfortable and just go straight to the good. And I think that lots of times, not only is that not healthy for us as the adults in the room, it's not healthy for the children in the room. So avoidance of the real hard questions and conversations, whether it's death of a relationship, shifting of a relationship, death at the bedside, whatever it is, if we avoid the real feelings and we just go through the steps to get to the next place, whether it's to get them to the funeral home or get them in the ground or get to a new house or whatever it is, if we just spend our time going to get to the next thing without being in this space, we avoid that hard stuff, then that's the place where we take it with us even more. So avoidance of the deep conversations that maybe are feelings that we would really just like to not feel or talk about with others. In relationships, there's just some things that I just don't want to deal with that with you. I really don't. And so that sad avoidance, well, it's still there, sister. It's still there. And it's going to be in the next place too. So avoidance, if there was a common thread, it's still the avoidance. And I come from, to be completely transparent, I'm an ordained Baptist minister as a female in rural the South. How ironic is that? That is not what I carry around. That is an inherited faith that totally is different for me now. But there are a lot of folks that have a really strong foundational inherited faith that, mama's going to die. This is what it's going to look like. We're going to go to the funeral. We're going to divide the assets. We're going to put her in the ground and we're done and moving on. That is pure avoidance, even though it looks like we went through the process. That's avoidance because nowhere in that mix did we really talk about how we're feeling. Did you really go and say to your sister or your brother, how are you doing? We just made sure everybody was fed. Everybody knew what time to be there in their clothes, all the things. That's avoidance also, even though it looks very much like what we're supposed to be doing. We have to sit in it. We have to sit in it.
What resources can people have? Like, I know we had my mom in hospice, and I have so much respect for hospice. I never knew really. I mean, I had heard of it, of course, but I never knew what an incredible organization hospice is in the death and dying process. But what about for people who go through other kind of grieving? Do you know of any resources that we can point people towards?
I don't personally know of any resources except reaching out to folks who do that, because just because I do grief counseling and I am part of the hospice group doesn't mean that I can't provide grief processing and support for somebody else. I also will tell you that there are a lot of grief groups within hospice organizations that you do not have to have had a loved one in hospice to join those grief groups. So there is that open possibility. Like my grief group is open to anybody in that community where I serve. Anybody can come for whatever reason. I oftentimes, Carrie, what happens is you have to speak it. I know I need this. Do you know someone? And you know as well as I do, word of mouth is better than any other possible source. But, you know, if we don't say we need it, then we're not going to find it. And so to say there's a website, all those kinds of things, there may be. I mean, we can Google for anything. But honestly, asking for, do you know where this help might be for me, is the place to start. And hopefully those folks will say, I do. And if they don't, they say, but here's somebody to ask. It's honestly about opening yourself up. And that's also part of the healing.
Right. Asking for help and being vulnerable. That's the thing is, I think grief gets a bad rap. Like I'm weak if I'm grieving. And I know this is a passion of yours, is to normalize the grief process. But there is that narrative that grieving is weak.
Yes. Yes. In all ways, in everything that we know to be true in our society today, to be vulnerable is not it. And those of us who are willing to be vulnerable have to also know that we have to have a support system behind us when we are opening ourselves up and it's safe enough, right? But if you've never done it and you don't have that safe place, it's really hard. And so you have to use your words and say, I'm really not at a good place. I need help. I don't know how to process this grief, this loss, this relationship. I want to do this differently. I want to move from this for all the positive and negatives that were here. I want to move to this place in a different way. And I need help with that. And so we have to ask. And that's the first step. But, you know, the hope is that when we are vulnerable, that we get the support that we need to be able to do that.
Yeah. And I would like to reverse the narrative, because vulnerability is strength. You have to be super strong to be able to ask for help and to be vulnerable. So I'd like to put that out there for you all to chew on, that we've been fed, I think, a narrative that is not the truth, that it does take strength to be vulnerable and to grieve. And what you said, Jennifer, about just asking, when you open yourself up to ask for help, like maybe you go to the hospice organization and you say, I'm not right now dealing with someone who is dying in their body, but I'm grieving an ending. And are there any resources? And I'm sure, I know how helpful the hospice organization was for my mom. They will give you, and they will help look for resources for you, or be able to point you in a direction to get the resources that you need.
Right. And the other part of that is that local person is going to know where you locally can get the support that you need. If someone were to call a hospice and not be heard, that would be very strange understanding for me, because that's not, hospice is always going to listen. and support.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So, Jennifer, the upside of going through the grief process is being able to then create space for new beginnings. And that is a hopeful place. I always look at challenging things in my life as opportunities to grow and evolve, to step into the next best version of my life. And so grieving is positive in that it completes that cycle to open up for new beginnings. Can you speak a little bit to that?
Yes. And so I would say it does. I'm not sure that I would agree that it completes a cycle. I think it completes an awareness.
Mm.
I think it completes an awareness of, oh, this is all of what this feels like. And I was vulnerable and I went in, I learned, I grew, and I did this and I'm okay. And now I'm moving to something new. And I think that what we have to remember is that we've created a synapses in our brain that's much different than what we've known before. And so because of that, it's not so fearful, or I don't have to feel like I cannot tell people how hard this is, because you've already done it and you came through it and you've experienced light and you've experienced joy, and that's good. Another thing that we have to remember is some people think you're supposed to stay in grief and you're supposed to stay mournful, and you're never supposed to have that joy and that happiness and newness. And that's not true. That is not true for any of us. That is not the way any of us are supposed to live. So when you step into that new beginning, no guilt. Don't feel bad about that, because this feels really good and this is good for me. Now, I will say that even in all the joy that I might have at this moment, my grief from loss still pops up periodically, whether it's the divorce, whether it's my dad, my sister, whatever, it still pops up. But because I did the work and I really sat in it, it doesn't take me to that place so deeply again. Still there. I can still be angry. I can still be angry, but it's not as much of a hook. I talk about putting my hooks out and letting people get on my hooks or whatever. We do the same thing with our emotions. My hooks are not out because I've healed myself enough and been vulnerable enough to move through all of that so that I can be still in it and not lose my joy, the joy of new beginnings, relationships, and those kinds of things. So we take with us a repaired, renewed, and stronger person with our emotional well-being when we go through it. I don't believe that we will get there in that newness, that honeymoon stage of a new relationship or whatever. I do not think that we are at the most healthy when we go into that if we've not done this work on this back end and been in the sticky stuff, the hard stuff. We have to repair from and live in and be in that and be vulnerable to get to this other place. Or what happens?
We just do it again.
Do it again. We do it.
And I love so much of what you said, including the importance of going through that and normalizing that even once we have gotten through a big portion of that work, and maybe we are in this new chapter, that those emotions still may come up, and that's totally normal. And that you have gone through the process so that you can repair quicker than if you hadn't gone through the grieving process.
Yes. And I like saying that that's normal. It's normal to go back through it, but also hopefully in your process of your healing and repair, you have developed personal tools, things that really benefit you, whether it's meditation or yoga or somatic work that you do to stay in your body, stay grounded, hiking, whatever it is. You have found ways to get yourself to a really healthy place. And so when you hit a bump in that new place and you start to go, oh my God, this is happening again, you can quickly go and use those tools and know your truth about this doesn't have to happen again. This doesn't have to happen again.
Well, you have pretty much summed up my 2025. I didn't know that was what was going to happen, but 2025 was me developing those tools so that I can move through the nervous system dysregulation quicker, and just practicing them over and over and knowing what it is that is going to relax me. Like I have one track that I listen to on YouTube that just instantly, like it's like a brain massage, and it just like massages the internal parts of my body. And whenever I'm dysregulated, I'll go and I'll just put it on and listen to it. But that's pretty much my 2025. And it was a lot of work, but I'm starting to see the benefits of moving through that. And a lot of that is the work that I've done with you. And yeah, really
worked hard.
Yeah, and you have been my support, and I'm just so grateful for you and for your work. So if anyone out there is feeling called to connect with you, Jennifer, either for your services or to maybe help find other resources for them, what is the best way to get in touch with you?
So you can email me anytime at soulcompasscenter@gmail.com, soulcompasscenter@gmail.com, or you can go to my website, soulcompasscenter.com, and you can get in touch with me there.
Okay, great. I'll link those in the show notes so people can just click there really easily. And any closing thoughts?
I wish for folks to not be fearful of the hard stuff, because when we open ourselves up and find the places that we need to find for support, there's such magic in the growth. There's so much magic. If we just go through our daily life and push it away or normalize things that don't need to be normalized, it's not okay to disregard our emotions, then we're missing what I think it is to be fully human. And so I wish for folks to not be fearful of being in the hard stuff, to find a place, to find support to do that.
Well, you're doing amazing work in the world. And I have had the extreme fortune of being so close and in the same town with you and getting to see you weekly for my support. So thank you, my friend. And thank you for the work that you're doing in the world. Thanks so much for listening to the Relationship Diversity Podcast. Want to learn more about relationship diversity? I've got a free guide I'd love to send you. Go to www.relationshipdiversitypodcast.com to get yours sent right to you. If you liked what you heard, please subscribe to the podcast. You being here and participating in the conversation about relationship diversity is what helps us create a space of inclusivity and acceptance together. The more comfortable and normal it is to acknowledge the vast and varied relating we all do, the faster we'll shift to a paradigm of conscious, intentional, and diverse relationships. New episodes are released every Thursday. Stay connected with me through my website, carriejaroslaw.com, Instagram, or TikTok. Stay curious. Every relationship is as unique as you are.